is a presentation of the Match Talk Podcast Network. It's time for the ODU Wrestling Monarch Mattcast, a show dedicated to all things related to the Old Dominion Wrestling program. On the web at monarchmattcast.com. Now, here's your host, three-time National Wrestling Writer and Broadcaster of the Year, and 2004 ODU alumnus, Jason Bryant.
Episode 34 of the ODU Wrestling Monarch Mattcast. Pleasure today to be joined by the guy that really had a big impact in my understanding of the world of collegiate and international wrestling. He was a coach at Old Dominion for 17 years and a recent inductee into the Hampton Roads Sports Hall of Fame, Coach Gray Simons. Coach, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you very much.
Now, first of all, I just want to know where the name Gray. It's Elliot Gray Simons. Why didn't you just go by Elliot the entire time? It's always been, as far as circles I know, it's always been Gray.
Well, when I was a small child, that's what they started calling me. My mom and dad started calling me Elliot. And I was a junior. That was my dad's name, Elliot Gray Simons. So they just called me Gray.
Yeah, just to get some separation about it. Okay, it
right.
Makes sense. Simple story, nothing crazy behind it. But as you went on to wrestle, of course, you're Gray Simons, and I'm looking at like old guides, and it's like Elliot Simons, Lock Haven States, and I'm like, that's Gray, that's
mm-hmm.
Coach. Actually, I mean, I don't even think I call you Gray. I've just called you Coach ever since I was like 18. But as we talk about the Hall of Fame a little bit, interesting class that you went in with Rocket Rod Taylor from the Hampton Roads Admirals. I got to know Rod a little bit when I interned with them. Tisha Penicharo, one of the greatest basketball players ever to step foot, not just at Old Dominion, but in women's college basketball. Mike Kadire went in, and I understand Coach Steve Martin had a few words about Mike Kadire's wrestling career that he kind of let the crowd in on.
Yes, he did. He thought Kadire should have stuck with wrestling from middle school right on up to high school, but I think he had his fill of wrestling and decided he wanted to go another route.
Yeah, Mike Kadire is pretty well respected up here in the state of Minnesota, so I got a feeling he might have made the right career choice because he probably's made a lot more money than a wrestler would have.
I'm sure of that.
Well, coaches, what's interesting is not just the umpteenth Hall of Fame you went into with the Hampton Roads Sports Hall of Fame, but I'm looking back on the research. You went into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame in 1978, and it's like 30. Let's see if I can do that. 38 years later, in the Hampton Roads Sport, you're still getting inducted into Hall of Fames. Well,
I'm very fortunate, and I'm glad they brought me in. It was very nice of them, and when you're wrestling, you're thinking, I'm winning this match. You win enough matches, you win the tournament. You win the tournament, you go on to the next thing. You never think about a Hall of Fame when you're competing. That's way down the road. So that never a thought about it. When it happens, it's a good thing though.
Yeah, before we even get into all the accolades that you have, you're a Norfolk native. You're now living in Virginia Beach, somewhat retired because as we learn in the sport of wrestling coaches actually never retire. But, your foundations in wrestling came from Norfolk. You wrestled at Granby High School under Coach Steve Martin's father, Billy Martin Sr. And, talk about just getting involved in wrestling in that era where, the Martin machine was rolling at Granby. I mean, how did kids get involved in wrestling in that era? There was no internet. There was no video. There might have been a flyer here and there, but explain how you got into the sport.
Well, at that time, there was no middle school or junior high. You went from 7th grade to 8th grade was at Granby High School. So when you got in the 8th grade, you took physical education class, and Coach Martin that's what he taught, physical education. And of course, he had a section on wrestling, and then you take the wrestling course, and then they would have an intramural tournament, and he would sign you up for it whether you wanted to or not. So you wrestle in the intramural tournament, and then if you did okay, then he'd talk to you about coming out for the team. And as I tell people, in the 8th grade, I was in the 75-pound weight class, and I got second. But there were only 2 guys in the weight. So that's how I got started.
It's kind of like my first tournament. I was second out of 2 weight classes. But let's not go comparing careers right now, because that argument will end very quickly. So as you go through Granby, and a lot of people, they know your accolades, but in high school you only picked up 1 state title, whereas your brother was a 4-timer. You eventually went on to great success at Lock Haven with 4 NAIA titles and 3 NCAA titles, and we'll touch on that later. But your brother's the 4-timer, you're just the 1-timer, and that was your sophomore year.
Right. My freshman year, I wrestled but then at the end of the year, Mike Grandstaff, he was defending state champ at 98. He dropped down, and then he went and he defended his title and pushed me out. And then my sophomore year, I was up at 103, and so that's the year I won it. And then my junior year, I lost to Grandstaff in the finals because he had switched to Norview. They changed the school zones, and he was at Norview. So I lost to him in the state finals. And then my senior year, I only wrestled the first half of the year because when I started at Granby, in the 8th grade, I started in the middle of the year. So the next January, when I turned the 9th grade, Coach Martin says, we're not going to wrestle you until next year, and you'll have 4 full years. So I thought that was a good thing, and that's what they did. But my senior year, they changed the rule. If you start in the middle of the year, you're finished in the middle of the year. So I wrestled the first half of the year, my senior year, and by that time I'd caught on to it pretty well. The fellow that won the state championship from Maury, I pinned him in the first part of the year. So I really didn't get a chance to wrestle in the state meet.
So from that era, we talk about getting involved in wrestling, and then there's the recruiting angle. I mean, you're coming out of high school in 1958. How do you end up at Lock Haven, which is then known as Lock Haven State College, now Lock Haven University? It might have even been Lock Haven State Teachers College for all I know back then, because
right, I think it was that first year.
Yeah. How do you end up in and it's called Matt Town because it's a wrestling crazy place. I mean, you walk up there now, I don't think you'll have to buy dinner or drinks, anything, because it's great. Let's go do something for them. But how do you end up there from Norfolk, Virginia?
Well, we went to the Eastern Intercollegiate Tournament. Coach Martin took Curtis Alexander and Bill Corby and I up there, and it was in Pittsburgh. And we had a couple of guys wrestling. I think Bobby Gunst was wrestling at Lehigh, and maybe a couple other guys. So we went to watch the tournament, and he talked to different coaches. And then there was a guy from Columbia University that had gone to Lock Haven, and he got talking to Billy Martin about Lock Haven, and they had he said the coach there was very good, Hubert Jack, and they had a national champ in 1953, Gus DiAugustino. He was NCAA champion. He was in 52, his alternate on the Olympic team. So Billy Martin called Hubert Jack and said, I got 2 boys interested in your school. I'd like for them to come up there and look. The other guy was John Epperly, and John went to the Citadel for a year and found out he wasn't cut out for that, and he wanted to go back to a different school and major in PE. So Billy Martin told Hubert Jack, he says, I got 2 guys. I'm setting up. He said, one of them will be a 3-time NCAA champ, and the other guy will be the best manager you ever had. So we went up and we went up and looked at the school, and we liked it. It was nice. We really liked Coach Jack, but they had no scholarships at all. So I got back. I told Coach Martin, I said, I'm going to have to go to Virginia Tech. They'd offer me a scholarship. And he said, Gray, you're not going to Virginia Tech. You're going to Lock Haven. I said, yes, sir. And quit my paper route and got a job at Southern Block and Pipe, stacking concrete. So that was it.
Now, back in that era, and people look at all the results and they get in discussing the top 10 lists, and you were I think wrongly left off the 75th anniversary team. But when we look at the career back then, the NAIA and the NCAA, their schools were dual affiliated. It wasn't like you win the NAIA, you qualify for the D1s. If your school was dual affiliated, you could wrestle in both. And Lock Haven had a bit of a stipulation where that was also an era where freshmen were ineligible at the NCAA level. But
at that time, if you had under 500 men, freshmen, you could wrestle. You used freshmen for varsity sports, but you couldn't be in the NCAA as a freshman. There was no freshman in the NCAA tournament. But if you had under 500 men, you could use freshmen for varsity sports. Lock Haven only had 850 students, and most of those, at least half of those were girls. So,
and in that era, where you had mentioned, what's funny is you mentioned Mike Grandstaff, and he beat you out for the spot in high school. 1962 NCAA semifinals, you beat him in the NCAA semifinals, and these Granby guys are everywhere in that era.
Right. We had not only Mike was in that tournament. Oakla Johnson at Michigan State, he was a Granby guy, and Billy Merriam from Lehigh, he was at that weight class. So we had 4 guys at that weight class in 62.
And if we're looking at it, you wrestled Grandstaff in the semis. Oakla Johnson lost to Mark McCracken, who you beat in the finals, and that's the video that you showed us every year at the when we come over to play bocce ball at your house. And it was, you're so fast, the film couldn't catch all the moves you were doing. I mean, it's like, we've heard you were fast. I mean, how fast do you think you actually were?
Well, I don't know. I think it's the main thing I think on that is you practice a lot and you get your timing down. And in wrestling, part of the thing is you get the guy to react. You set him up, make him react, and you know what the reaction's going to be, and then your timing. So you act, he reacts, and you're ready for his reaction, and then you hit your move. So it's just not I'm going to shoot a double leg. It's like I'm going to start with an arm drag, and then he counters, I'll do a double leg. So it's to get the guy to react, and you know the reaction. So that just takes a lot of practice and doing it over and over again.
Going back in time a little bit to the pre-Lock Haven, but you were coming out of Granby. Old Dominion was actually just starting up a program. Pete Robinson started the program in 1957. And was there ever any thought about going to that school? I guess at the time it wasn't even Old Dominion College yet.
I think it's still William Mary Division.
Yeah, I mean it was right in that changeover. I mean, was there ever any thought about even saying, I'm just going to stay in Norfolk and wrestle?
No, I didn't think about that. Coach Martin had talked to some schools, and I had some contacts. Like University of Maryland contacted me, and Billy Guttermouth went up there, went to Maryland. He was a senior that year, but once I went up and saw Lock Haven, I thought, well, this would be a good place for me because they've had success. They had a national champ, they had successful teams, and it was wrestling was their main sport. They had 850 students, and they draw over 1,000 people at matches.
Yeah, the field house there where they held the Matttown tournament for a long time. I mean, their wrestling room is connected to it. And for those who've never been there, you walk into those doors through the field house into the wrestling room. There's pictures of all the national champions, paintings and pictures. Well, guess which one's dead center, folks? Gray Simon's above the doors. So you can't go anywhere in that town without at least seeing a little bit of Gray.
So anyway, it was a good thing. And when where the wrestling room is now, when I was there, that was a swimming pool, and we practiced in the field house, and it was, you're in a big area. We put mats down and stuff, and just wrestled right there. And wore a lot of sweat clothes. But,
as was the case back then. Now, well, what's interesting is during your college career, you won NCAA titles 1959. Actually, NAIA titles 59. So 62, 61, 60 for the NCAAs. You had the NAIA in 1959, as well as you've won 7 college national championships. But in that time, there was a little thing called the Olympics that you wrestled in during your college career. I mean, they were in Rome, and the wrestling competition was in the Coliseum in Rome. What was your memory of that, and what did you think going in? It's like, wait, we're going to wrestle in the Coliseum?
Well, actually, we were right next to the Coliseum. It was called a basilica.
It's like the archways are kind of connected to it. Is that kind of it's technically in it, but not like in where the Lions were, right?
Right. Yeah, we were kind of right next to it, and it was a kind of a half dome type building. So in the morning, the walls face the east. So in the morning, they had a morning round at like at 8 or 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock maybe. So they had a round then, and then when the sun got up over top of it, it was too hot to wrestle. So then they had a night session. So you could wrestle like 10 o'clock in the morning, and then you could have another match at the night. Or you could miss the morning session and have a night session, depending on how they do. And then every day was a 6 a.m. Weigh-in, and it was flat weight every day. You had no weight allowance. So I think I went like 4 days in a row. I was in the tournament and picking flat weight every day. So it was a tough thing.
Yeah, not like where they have now it's a 24-hour weigh-in for the Olympics, and in college it's 2 hour. I mean, and they're only weighing in once at the Olympics, so of course the competition now is only 1 day. It's hopefully something they will eventually change. But you had the opportunity to wrestle in 2 Olympic Games, 1960, 1964, and you're getting into coaching, and your coaching route took you from Lock Haven, which your program saw great success, to Indiana State. And I want to kind of jump into the Tennessee and the Old Dominion years, because at Tennessee you had one of the top 10 teams in the country. You had All-Americans coming through, and then the SEC had began falling apart with the wrestling programs. What do you remember about coaching at Tennessee when the Alabamas are dropping, the Auburns are dropping? You know, Kentucky had a good team; they were dropping. I mean, it was basically Tennessee and LSU left. Yeah,
we were the last 2 teams, and all those teams, Kentucky, Auburn, Florida, all were top 10 teams at one time or another. So it was a very competitive conference, and I think, like you said, LSU, we were the very last team to have a team, and the AD there was a good guy, and I think he liked me and he liked what I was doing. And then when he retired, the new AD, he was there a year, and then they dropped the program. And they used the excuse of Title IX. I don't think that had anything to do with it. I just think they made a decision to phase out wrestling in the SEC, and that's what they did.
Yeah, the question or finger always tends to point on which team started it. People point to Pat Dye at Auburn. People point to Bear Bryant at Alabama. But in that era, I mean, what was it like to be in the SEC, which was still football country? I'm sure it was just as crazy then as it is now, minus all the media attention. But, I mean, what was wrestling like, and how was it respected on campus amongst the students and the other athletes at Tennessee?
Oh, they liked it. And we had a couple of football players on our team. They just kind of came out for the team. So we got good crowds, and the competition was terrific. It was very good, very good. And during that time, we won the Matttown tournament one year and did very well. So it's and like I say, all those teams, Florida and Auburn, they're all tough.
Is it kind of, I mean, how do you look at it now when you see in those teams that those monster sellouts on Saturday for football and be like, man, They've had sellouts forever, but man, I mean, how good do you think these SEC teams could be today in wrestling if they were to say, all right, well, let's start wrestling up again, conference wide?
Well, they could jump if they get the right coaches. They could jump right in there because they're all like beautiful schools, have great campuses. It wasn't very difficult to recruit kids. I remember I brought some kids down from New York and they really liked it, and one of them said, they said, "Boy, this is nice. It wasn't like I thought it would be." I said, "What do you think it'd be?" He says, "Oh, I thought it'd be like Hee Haw."
A lot of people have said that about Poquoson too, where I'm from. So I don't know. But so the program is dropped, and then the opportunity comes at Old Dominion. And prior to your arrival, Coach Robinson had retired. Wade Chalice came in for a couple years, and then Steve's older brother Billy coached for a year and a half, 2 years, and then the opportunity's there. And when you saw the Old Dominion job opened up, what was going through your mind? I mean, how were you contacted? Because this is also an era where Debbie White's there, Mickey Bale is there, Carol Hudson's there, Dr. Jarrett's there. I mean, how does the courtship of Old Dominion in bringing Gray Simons home work out?
Well, I forget, someone talked to me at the NCAAs and said that the Old Dominion job would be open, and they might be interested since I wasn't coaching that year. Want to know if I'd be interested. And I said sure. So I came down and talked to them, and everything worked out okay. So that was good.
Was it nice to come back home and obviously to close out your career?
Yeah. I grew up in Norfolk, and Mary got a job in Virginia Beach at the school system, so we lived here, and I commuted. But and a lot of people I knew still lived here and stuff. People I'd gone to school with, so it was good.
Yeah, looking at some of those teams, 1990, 91, nationally ranked, 14-3. You won the Colonial in '94. Looking through the number of qualifiers and All-Americans in an era where the qualification systems were vastly different. I mean, you've been coaching college. You had coaching college wrestling for 30-something. You've seen so many changes. What do you think about the systems that they've got now in terms of getting athletes to the NCAAs compared to what it's been in your days? What were some of the weirder things you'd seen with qualifications and maybe even those wild card meetings?
Well, it's a tough thing because it's not like the old days where you're qualified, but now the coaches are if you maybe they're qualified 4 or 5, but then they'll pick the rest of the guys. It'll be based on the coaches picking them, and that's a tough thing. But when I was wrestling, it was an open tournament. You could bring anybody you wanted to. So, of course, I don't think they could do that now, but that's the way they did it.
Yeah, you'd probably have everybody who was like, I'm going to nationals.
But the whole thing is, too, the bigger conferences and the stronger conferences, they get bigger every year, and the smaller conferences lose people every year. It's just a tough thing. So I think it should be, everybody should have a minimum amount everybody should have at least the top 2 and maybe the top 3 guys. Take the top 3 from each conference. Like in the Big Ten, they could take more, but like the smaller conferences, at least take the top 3 guys.
As we shift over to some of the athletes that you'd coached in your era, and speaking from an Old Dominion standpoint, 91, the first time in school history at the Division I level, there were 2 All-Americans in 1 year, Nick Garone and Peter Horst. I still see Nick quite frequently as he's still active in wrestling, and both those guys came to ODU from other places. And what was the allure for them? What did you do to get them there, and what made them have success at Old Dominion? As your first crop of All-Americans at ODU were those 2 in 91.
Well, I think, I had recruited a lot of guys from Long Island. I had NCAA champion Chris Edmonds. He was from Long Island. So when Nick was at Syracuse, when he left there, his coach, high school coach, and the people in Long Island, and Chris Edmonds had been my assistant coach for about a year down here. So, they called me and said that if I would be interested in Nick, I said, sure. And same thing with Pete. I think, they knew people that had wrestled for me, and at Penn State, they were so deep at that weight, he was having a hard time cracking the lineup. So he came down here, and of course he started right away and did great. So, I think coaching all those years and having different people speak up for you that you're doing a good job, that's what does it, your reputation. If you build a good reputation, then you get good kids.
1994, Jody Staler transfers back to the area. He had been an All-American at North Carolina, and I believe him and Coach Lamb had a bit of a falling out. I know Coach Lamb was definitely a character back in that era, but when Jody showed up and then made the NCAA finals that year, he was your first Division I finalist at Old Dominion, but you had coached wrestlers in the finals before. And then there's, for those who don't know the story, people could call it a controversial call against David Hirsch from Cornell, a fleeing the mat call late in the match that broke a tie. It was the one point that decided it. And how much do you think about that match to this day and go back and it's like, man, definitely could have had a national champ there?
Well, that's wrestling, and that's the call the guy made, and you can't do anything about it. I did not agree with the call, but Jody had other opportunities during that match to to score. So it's that's wrestling. That's the way it works, and that's the way it is. So once it's over, it's over. So I felt bad for Jody because I think he had the talent to be the national champ, but it just didn't work out that way.
Yeah, how often do you get back to check out matches, and how close do you follow the program to this day?
Well, I go to most of the home matches. If we're here in town, I go to all the home matches and stuff. So, and I go to the NCAAs every year. So, I follow the wrestling pretty closely.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about facilities, and there's a couple people I also want to bring up. But when a lot of us came through, and granted, I was not on the team, but I spent a lot of time in that wrestling room and a lot of time in your office on that couch, hearing you tell stories about Doug Bluebaugh. Yeah. But but when the facilities, I mean, how did they change over the years? I mean, we had the old room with the jagged corners and the pillars. Now they have a beautiful wrestling room, but the campus itself is just undergoing basically a metamorphosis. I mean, what do you remember? Yeah. What do you remember about when you showed up, and maybe you remembered about back in the 50s when the school was just kind of getting its footing? Well,
when I came in '87, they had a chain link fence around it, and it was the neighborhoods around were kind of run down and everything. They've cleaned all that out. Cleaned the neighborhoods up, put in new homes. The campus now it's deluxe. It's very nice, very nice. They made great strides, redoing buildings, building new buildings. The whole athletic complex is much better, and it's one of the nicest campuses for that size school there is in Virginia.
And of course, the interesting is the bit you mentioned Chris Edmond and coach with you. I mean, there's been a line of assistant coaches, and granted, the position wasn't essentially full time until later on, or at least a full wage later on in your career. But who are some of the names that you brought in that people need to remember? Like, hey, they did coach here.
Yeah, well, Chris, and he came in, and I had some other guys. I tried to get Steve Gadosh. He was with me in Tennessee, but I couldn't work that out. But Rich Castano, he did a good job for me. Jamie Kelly, he did a good job for me. So I had some good assistants.
Yeah, of course.
But none of them were full time. All of them were part time. So I had no full time assistant.
And you even had to teach some classes. Matter of fact, you're still teaching classes. As if I can do my math right, you're 77. You're still teaching a class at ODU.
Yeah, physical conditioning, PE 171. So I had the class today, as a matter of fact.
Have you had any wrestlers come through that class and be like, "Hey, wait a minute, weren't you the old coach?"
Yeah, I've had a couple of Steve's guys in there. Yeah. So
they get any extra credit by knowing anything about your career?
No.
Couple of personalities we've had come through in your career at ODU. One guy that was a big part of my career in terms of basically just knowing what wrestling was and being close to the program was Jeff Rusak, who was one of my roommates. He's your only 4-time national qualifier at Old Dominion, and you got him from Pennsylvania again with that tie to Peter Horst, and there's that all those relationships. And when it comes to recruiting, when you get guys like, how hard was it to coach Jeff because he did stuff that was so crazy unorthodox, and two. Wow. I mean, you had some personalities on those teams in your later years. You probably added some more gray hairs.
Oh yeah. Well, Jeff, he wrestled like at 140, 42 in high school, and or maybe even the 133. I don't know. He wasn't very big, and then when he got there, he redshirted that first year, and then the next year he was wrestling 150, and he went up a weight class every year. So, but Jeff he had some unorthodox stuff he did, but it's like I said last night in my talk, there's the right way to do it, the wrong way to do it, and the way that works. And Jeff did it the way it works. So he made it work. So, it was the stuff that you couldn't teach other people, but it worked for him. So if it's working, you let it be. So.
Yeah, I think he might have thrown more leg cradles in his 4 years than you might have seen combined your entire career. Would that be accurate?
No doubt about it. Haven't seen one since.
I see one every now and then, and I'm like, Rusak, I'll talk to, Matt Small or something, and we'll be talking, he's like, Russ, hey, what happened over there? And he goes, you Rusacked him. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. We talk about that. And then one story I want to kind of get a little background on is when I was doing some research on the history of the program and digging together for some of these archival type of things that I'm working on, is Greg Satchel's name came up and wrestled for you at Tennessee, comes to ODU, joins the military, and then has a year of eligibility. That to me seems like a unique story in how athletes follow coaches, and then there's time off because there's a gap between his 3 times he wrestled at the NCAAs. I'm just trying to get your take on what you remember about him in that situation.
Well, he came to Tennessee and wrestled there. And he started as a freshman, but he was very undisciplined, and we had to stay on him all the time. And but I had 3 other guys: Chris Edmonds, Tony Mills, and Glenn Lanham, and they would try to keep Greg straight. He lived up in the dorm with him, athletic dorm, and he did a good job. He qualified as a freshman. For the NCAAs. Then they dropped the program. Then I think he went to UVA for a year, and he didn't cut it there. And then he went into the Marine Corps. Well, after he got out of the Marine Corps, he was a different guy. They had really straightened the guy out, and he was all business, knew what to do. So he had a year left. So he came to ODU and wrestled that year and did a heck of a job. And he got hurt in the Nationals, hurt his ribs. Otherwise, I think he would have placed. He was very good, very good.
No, of course, the guys that finished out my era, the Dennis Whitbys, the Chad Filsons of the world, we had a lot of fun there, and really we talk highly of Coach all the time. And one of my buddies, Charlie Bush from Minnesota, he's out here with me now. He's just moved back, so we're telling stories about Coach Simons. And there's like, hey, remember that time, Coach? I mean, was there a situation with anybody you in any of your years at Old Dominion where you're just like, you know what? I need to get out of coaching. These guys are driving me nuts.
No, none of the wrestlers, because the wrestlers, they want it's you tell them what to do, and they want to do it, and they do it. And, if they don't do it, that's hanging on their neck. I mean, if you're into wrestling and you want to be good, then you gotta follow certain procedures. You got to do things a certain way and stay on a straight path. So if you don't do it, that's your problem. And I'll talk to I talk to him about it and stuff, but you can't lead the horse to water if he doesn't want to drink. So. And
this has also been something that's been consistent with the program. I've mentioned pretty much everybody I've mentioned that's from this era. They're a high school coach. They're coaching now. They're teaching. They're giving back to the kids. And Ben Summerlin and Whitby and Filson are down at Hickory. I know Jesse Pierce and Buckner are over at Grassfield. Matt Smalls at Great Bridge. I mean, I could go on and on. Yeah. Donald Motley is at Oscar Smith. I mean, we've got Old Dominion wrestling alumni that are basically. I mean, Eric Decker's over at Pocosin, my alma mater. He came in when Steve was coaching. So the program itself has really been feeding the high school coaches in this area for a long, long time. My high school coach, Billy Ruff, wrestled at Old Dominion. Mark Billups coached there for a year. I mean, Al Hackman. Right. I mean, we've got so many people from the area that have come through Old Dominion and wrestled for you. How often, I mean, can a day go by where you don't go to a wrestling event and see somebody you haven't coached?
No, I've run into a lot of those guys, and I like doing it. And it's always good seeing them. And they've done a great job. Most of them, they brought the programs up, and it's the whole thing's good. And that's I'm proud that I was able to coach those guys, and they're doing well.
What do you think about the job Steve's doing at Old Dominion now? There's been a number of All-Americans since he took over after he retired in 2005. Ryan Williams has made the NCAA finals. They had 2 All-Americans 2 years ago for the second time in program history. Kevin Beasley has been in the finals of the World Team Trials for the Greco-Roman team. He's made a junior world team. So, we got guys in ESPN semifinals and finals on TV. I mean, I think Steve's obviously done a great job, and you've known Steve since he was, you wrestled for his dad. You've probably known him since before he was born. I mean,
right.
It's got to be, sitting there going, man, I wrestled for this guy, and now his son's coaching. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, Steve's done a good job, and he's hired good people to help him. I think he has good assistants, and that's a big thing, because nowadays you need a couple full-time assistants that are working all the time to help you with the program, because you just can't do it by yourself anymore. You need the head coach, you need a couple full-time assistants, and then maybe a couple of part-time assistants too, because recruiting, that's on all your thing nonstop. That's all year long. So it's and I think Steve's done a good job of that.
Last thing I want to bring up as we wrap up this episode is, I mentioned your age at 77 and still teaching, still riding the bike, still being active. But you and your wife, Mary, just celebrated your 51st wedding anniversary. And while you didn't win any medals at the Olympics in your 2 tries, does your wife deserve a medal for having to be married to a wrestling coach for 51 years?
Oh, yeah. And I said that last night. I said, if you're married to a wrestling coach, plus you had both your sons wrestle, and that is, having your kids wrestle is tough on the mom. It's, it's a direct ticket to heaven.
I just remember I was announcing I can't remember what match it was. It was in the field house. It might have been against Delaware State or George Mason or somebody. I mean, it was in an era where we were only getting maybe 50 people coming into the field house. I think they were doing Taekwondo in the upper level. And I can't remember who was ref in the match. It might have been the late Gary Beatson. I don't know. But when Coach's wife said something, you knew it was a bad call because you won't hear anything. She's up there knitting or something. They're like, "Come on, Gary, he stole it." I mean, it's just like everybody would turn to like, "Uh-oh, you done pissed Coach's wife off."
Well, that's it. Yeah. So anyway, it's all worked out, and she's doing well. She still runs half marathons. So
I made it about halfway through a marathon. That's about as close as I got.
Yeah, this is a 13.1, so she's still running those, so that's good. And I tell people the furthest I ever ran was 6 miles. That's because I got lost.
Yeah, I don't want to run 6 miles. I don't think anybody does. But Coach, it's been great catching up with you. We'll see you down the line, and thanks for coming on the program.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Take care.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.